guest is the co-leader of the Green Party, Cem Özdemir. For a long time, the Greens have claimed the moral high ground in politics here in Germany, but now they're shooting once again for a role in government in a possible coalition next year with the Christian Democrats, and that may require them to choose between power and principle. Which way will they go, and how damaging are the skeletons in their cupboard? Cem Özdemir, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you, pleasure.
You've by and large supported the Chancellor's policy on migrants, the open door policy. Let's just look at the catalogue of disasters that have followed from it, if we may. The walls, the wires, the riot police, the end of Schengen in more than 10 countries. Don't you regret this policy now?
No, I think there was no other choice at that time to open the border, to welcome the refugees. But you're right, a lot of things would have been a lot easier if the European Union jointly would have agreed on a system to distribute refugees. And
well, it might have been an idea to consult them, mightn't it?
Well, we did, obviously. Some countries refused, like Hungary, like Poland and others. But let's be fair, I mean...
Well, you had even senior politicians here saying they were caught on the hop. They didn't know that this was coming. Malu Dreyer, for instance, said, we won't consult it. Country wasn't consulted.
You mean on the national level,
yes,
in Germany?
Yes,
but I'm talking about the European
level. But they weren't consulted either.
No, they were consulted, obviously, but some of them have different opinions and think that this is a national question. I think this is a European challenge and there needs to be a European answer. But I also...
But there isn't going to be one, is there? You've had 160,000 refugees who've been waiting for distribution around Europe since May last year, and only a few hundred have actually been dealt with.
Some countries like Italy, like Spain, like the Benelux countries, they will obviously be willing to share the refugees. Others, some Eastern European countries, obviously refuse. I think at least they have to pay for it, because there cannot be a kind of a job sharing that you take all the benefits from the European Union, but when it comes to responsibilities to refuse them.
They don't want them. There are 42,000 migrants that are trapped in Greece at the moment. The European Union has had some of its worst photo ops ever, with dead children on beaches.
Yes,
people have been trying to get in.
That's why the most
important topic is This is a result of Germany's policy to say, open the doors, let everybody in.
Well, I'm opposition, so it's my job to criticize the government, which I obviously do. But
yeah,
I think
you pretty much accept the welcome culture,
not everything. I also blame the government that it was the German government who some years ago, when the Italian colleagues and the Greek colleagues asked us for help and asked us for a European solution, it was the German government who said, well, this is a national problem of Italy or of Greece and it's not a European problem. So obviously, we were not always the most welcoming country for European solutions, and now when we need the others, they remind us to form a German quote. So I think if you want the others to behave European, you yourself should behave European, and maybe we should also talk about the root causes, and that's the war in Syria.
Well, I'm talking about the situation of the migrants at the moment, and the fact that the policies which you by and large have supported have not helped them greatly, have not helped people who are still trying to get in, people who are still trapped.
Well, it helped those people who are here.
A few.
Well, it's a million, it's not a few. A million people is not nothing.
As an opposition, you're supposed to scrutinise government policy and see where the gaps are, aren't you? There was no
I
plan
don't think opposition's job is to always have the opposite position of what the government says. I believe that we should look at what they're doing.
That's a very narrow definition.
No, it's a reasonable definition that says if it makes sense what they're doing, I support it, and if I think it's wrong,
you don't have any ideas of your own?
Well, for instance, the deal with Turkey I criticize heavily because I think the price is too high, that we do not talk about human rights abuses in Turkey, we do not talk about the criticism by Amnesty International that Turkey might refuse refugees from Syria, pull them back to Syria. That's obviously what we criticize. But again, this is about lives of human beings. I think it's a bit too simply just to look at opposition and government. I want to talk about what we can do to save these people.
You said there should be no dirty deal with Turkey. Those were your words. And now you have one. Because Germany's back was to the wall. It needs Turkey because it had no planning, because it can't cope with the refugee flows, and because the numbers are too great. You outsourced to a human rights abuser,
well, the first,
Turkey,
no,
which is a total irresponsibility.
It's a chain of mistakes. The first mistake was, well, most of the refugees did obviously not come to Europe at the first time. They came first to the neighboring countries. We were not there, and when I say we, it's not only Germany, it's the UK, it's all European countries, including our American friends, to help those refugees in the refugee camps in the neighboring countries of Syria. That was the main reason why hundreds of thousands of people left those countries to come here, and some of them lost their lives. So we should have been at the first place there present. Second, Turkey policy of Merkel is maybe one of the biggest defeats of her chancellery. In 2005, when she took over power from us, she stopped EU negotiations with Turkey in a time when Turkey was moving towards reform in the right direction. She rediscovered Turkey at a time when she needed Turkey because of the refugee crisis.
But here's what
That's
you
a big
said.
mistake.
Here's what you said. You said we should help Turkey, but not at the cost of letting Turkey escalate the conflict in the southeast and drifting further into authoritarian rule. This is your quote. Yes.
It's a good quote.
It's a quote, but it's meaningless, isn't it? How do you propose to stop Turkey drifting into an authoritarian state? Or to stop its operations in the southeast of the country?
Merkel's mistake was she never invested time into Turkey. She never thought that there is a strategic need, not only of us, of the whole entire European Union, to have Turkey close towards us and not close towards East or close towards anywhere. She didn't pay attention to Turkey, and now it's Erdogan who reminds her to her old quotes, and of course is unfortunately misusing the refugee crisis.
So living in the real world, Mr. Özdemir, you go to...
I do from time to time.
Okay, from time to time. But you go to President Erdogan and you say, I don't like the crackdown on human rights, and he slams the door in your face. What then?
Well, we need Turkey,
because you
but on the other
criticised her
side...
for the tone of the discussion. You said her tone with Erdogan was wrong.
Well, there's no reason for
what tone
one-sided...
would you recommend?
Well, it's very simple. There is no reason for one-sided relations. Turkey needs us as we need Turkey. Turkey has no other choice.
Right now, you need Turkey a lot more than they need you. You need them to, because you've outsourced the refugee crisis.
I do not agree. I do not agree for a simple reason. Look at the choices that Turkey has. Turkey wanted to be the Sunni leader of the region. That completely failed. There was a time when Erdogan wanted to spend his holidays with Assad. Then he wanted to support all his enemies, including Al-Qaeda and all the other crazy guys. There was a time when he wanted to have an alliance with Putin.
Mr. Özdemir, he's sitting pretty. His economy is fine. He's doing well, and he wins election after election. He's sitting pretty. He doesn't need you.
Well, he lost the election. He lost the election before, and then
he won it again.
More or less
waited and he
cracked down all the opposition TV channels. He made it impossible for the opposition party to make rally events because bombs were exploding. So this is not the kind of description of a fair election how we would describe it in Europe.
But what's the use? My question to you is, what's the use now of shouting about human rights, grandstanding
well, because
about
it's our
human
values.
rights?
It's very simple, because that's what Europe is about.
You're not going to get him to say, oh, thank you, Mr. Özdemir, I see the error of my ways. Thank you for pointing it out to me. I now understand that I'm on the wrong course. He's not going to say it, is he?
I know that the world is not only, unfortunately, built of nice people, that you sometimes have to negotiate with people like Sisi, with people like Putin, with people like Erdogan. I'm aware of that. If we would be in power, we would also have to talk to these guys, whether we like them or not. That's not my point. I do not ask Mrs. Merkel, to put herself in chains in Ankara and protest against human rights abuses.
You're enjoying the luxury of opposition, which allows you to say unrealistic things, make unrealistic demands, and claim to be the moral voice of Germany.
Well, some people criticize us for being too fair and too moderate, but I think this is okay. But let me come back to Turkey. What I want Merkel to do is, once she meets Mr. Erdogan, at least she can spend 5 or 10 minutes to meet some of the opposition leaders. When she makes the program that Mr. Davutoglu or Mr. Erdogan has prepared for her, she could at least visit some of your colleagues in Turkey who are from opposition news groups who are really under pressure.
And how would that endear her to him when she needs him so much? How would that endear her to him?
Well, Mr. Tusk...
Politics...
You remember the pictures from yesterday?
You don't know what active politics between states is because you've never conducted it, do you? It's a luxury.
That's not true. We were 7 years in power in Germany.
You were 7 years. You weren't 7 years in power.
You
were in the national parliament, but you weren't in government. You weren't making day-to-day decisions.
Well, I was a member of the parliament at that time, and I also had to negotiate with Turkish colleagues, and I know the difference of negotiating. You can be nice, you can be fair, you can be friendly, but at the same time you can be open. Mrs. Merkel, by the way, did that very well in Russia when she visited Mr. Putin, and then she paid a visit to Memorial, the famous human rights organization. So why can't she do the same thing in Turkey that she did very well in Russia? That's
you recently felt very strongly about a bill on recognizing genocide in Armenia. And you wanted to put this through the German parliament.
In the German Bundestag.
You say this, but you did a deal to back off, didn't you? You did a deal with the Christian Democrats. You crossed the floor and you shook their hand on the deal to delay it. To delay the bill because it would have harmed her chances with the refugee deal.
No, I think
Chancellor Merkel's
I think you got the wrong information there. It's exactly the opposite. I made a deal with the Christian Democrats that we put it as a joint motion to the floor, to the Bundestag, and in June 2nd, I'm just coming from negotiations with the Christian Democrats, we will have the first time in German history, after 101 years after the genocide, the German Bundestag will make a decision that it was a genocide, that Germany, as the country that comes after the German Reich, has a responsibility because we were an ally of the Ottoman Empire.
But it was delayed. It was delayed.
I wanted to have
when you had said
1 year ago.
No foreign head of state may decide what we resolve here in the German Parliament.
But you're aware that I'm not in power, as you said.
I know you're
this
not.
is a big success for an opposition party that we forced Angela Merkel, that we forced Steinmeier, that we forced a government that has an 80% majority to follow my line. That's what the government will do on June 2nd. I invite you to come to the Bundestag. You will see a situation of history, 101 years of neglecting the genocide, and the German Bundestag, with an 80% majority of the government, will follow exactly our line.
Okay, so if you've pushed the government into that, you've signally failed to push Europe into accepting refugees, as we mentioned earlier. I want to just talk about your policy document.
I take a lot of responsibility for Germany, but I'm not able to take responsibility for every single member state of the European Union.
But your slogan says change
my
Europe.
Capacities.
Your slogan
I would
says
love
change
to have
Europe.
that power,
your
but that's
grand
beyond my
slogan
capacities.
says change Europe, but you haven't changed Europe as far as their refugee policy is concerned.
My grand slogan is first. Joint responsibility makes it easier for everybody.
It is one of your slogans,
and
change Europe, isn't it? It is one of your slogans.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, but I'm pointing out that as far as refugees are concerned, you've signally failed to move Europe on the refugees.
That's not the case for every country. It's the case for some countries. And let me come back to my other point. And the second point is, as long as we don't talk about root causes, why people leave their countries, nothing will change, because we will make deals with Turkey.
Okay.
They will search for other ways. So we're half a billion people.
Okay.
Just very briefly. We're half a billion people in the European Union. If we unite in fight against root causes, if we make, for instance, something like a Marshall Plan for Northern Africa, we can make a difference. That's what
Cem
I want.
Özdemir, it's not happening, is it? You say these things.
Well, nothing is happening if you don't do anything.
Try telling that to Poland.
Somebody has to start.
To Hungary, to Slovakia, to Sweden, to Denmark, to Austria. The only winners out of all this have been the far-right parties. We've just seen the Austrian Freedom Party storming to a huge win in the first round of the presidential election.
That's a very good example.
They're the winners from all this policy of yours.
I think exactly the opposite. I mean, look what the Austrian governments from Christian Democrats and Social Democrats were saying. They were not joining Merkel's policy. They were criticizing Merkel and our policy and saying we need national border controls, we need a limit to the number of refugees coming to our countries. And as you quoted, and what was the result of the presidential election? Was it a defeat of the right wing? It was the opposite. That's exactly what I'm saying. If you try to copy the slogans of the right wing, you make them stronger. Our way is more successful.
Your way isn't producing any success at all, is it?
Well,
you say you're more successful. Successful at what?
We're managing to integrate 1 million people into this country. That's not nothing.
You're trying to immigrate.
Well, I mean, the generation of my parents was successfully integrated, and now it's another challenge. And I'm not a pessimist. I believe we have a strong country, we have a strong business community. we have universities, we have a lot of very active people, and this civil society together with the state, of course with some shortcomings, of course with some mistakes, but at the end of the day this country will manage it and it will become stronger.
Well, you mentioned what happened to your parents, but there are plenty of people in the Turkish community who would say it hasn't been successful at all, the integration. But I'm talking about somebody called Serdar Somuncu, who was born in Istanbul, writer and satirist.
Funny guy.
And he says Turks have never been properly accepted in Germany. Turkish people living in Germany have long felt persecuted by German degradation and arrogance. They feel humiliated and betrayed, and they don't believe in the good intentions of German politicians when they talk about integration. So it's not all the happy story that you'd like to put forward, is it?
No, I'm not saying that everything is perfect. I'm saying this is a long way.
It's
a complicated way,
isn't it? This is a long way from perfect.
Making a minority part of the mainstream society is one of the most complicated things in the world, and we're talking about a country that does not have a lot of experience. I mean, we're not a classical country of immigration. Germany is a new country of immigration,
where
so
there
it's
have
learning
been
by
more
doing.
than 1,200 attacks on refugee hospitals.
Absolutely.
Hostels and attempts to burn them down.
Some of these places I've been and protested together with the refugees and with the local people against the government. That's because some state governments, unfortunately, together with the national government, unfortunately, has missed the time to speak openly and clear against racism and fight hard against racism. And one of the worst states in Germany, unfortunately, is Saxony. The government of Saxony for a long time said, there is no such a problem. If you neglect that you have an illness, if you neglect that you have a problem, it's hard to fight against it.
When the attacks came against women on New Year's Eve in Cologne, when there was troubles in Hamburg as well, why did it take you a month to come out and actually admit?
Me, I was one of the first people talking out and speaking out against it. You can just Google it.
About the background of the people who were taking part in this. You had to have 3 of your women MPs, Franziska Brandner.
Who is you? Is you Germany? Is
no,
you the
your
government?
Party,
or is
your
you
party,
me?
Franziska Brandner, Annalena Baerbock, Ulla Schaufs, had to come out and say, we need an open discussion about the background of these people, because they weren't getting it. They weren't getting it, were they?
Listen, I'm the chairperson of the most feminist party of this country. I'm the chairperson of the country who was the first party who openly fought for rights of gays and lesbians. So it's clear that we say that a country that becomes a more colorful country also has rules, and everybody has to stick to those rules.
But you said something quite honest. You said maybe we overlooked something or even looked away. You did look away, didn't you?
I certainly did not look away, because, as I said, I'm a person who, whenever...
Well, you posed the question.
No, I said...
Whether you had looked away
what
I
said is
of those people who were responsible
people and
for
assimilating
the
people. Integrating and assimilating people is more than language and is more than workspace. It's also a cultural dimension to it. And you know, it shouldn't come as a surprise. Don't forget, some people are coming from states where police is corrupt. Some people are coming from states where there's no equal rights between men and women. So to expect those people to immediately adapt to this society is very naive. We have to train these people, prepare these people, and tell them, if you come to Germany, this is the country of the German constitution. Like it or not, if you don't like it, nobody's forced to live here.
And some of their interpretations of Islam will prevent that happening.
Well,
you've said such acts, and you were talking about the sex acts, could well have something to do with the patriarchal culture and a sexist interpretation of Islam.
Well, that's exactly what I said.
How do you counter that sexist interpretation of Islam?
Together with the majority of Muslims, I think it's important to fight against these kind of interpretation of Islam. But again, you know, it was not me.
How fight? Look at the British example.
Well, let me give you an example.
Well, let me just say, the British example. Recent poll, major poll, published in the newspapers and on television, half of British Muslims want gay sex to be banned. 1 in 5 never enter a non-Muslim home, and nearly 40% believes wives should obey their husbands. How are you going to counteract those sorts of attitudes?
Well, the Islam that I was taught by my parents is a different Islam. It's an Islam of tolerance. It is an Islam of living together with different cultures.
Clearly, not everybody shares your version, do they?
But the majority did. But, you know, let's not forget, where is the source of fundamentalism? The source of fundamentalism is Saudi Arabia.
It's not just fundamentalism, is it? It's not just fundamental. These attitudes are not just fundamental.
Let me just conclude that.
They're different.
I do not deliver weapons to Saudi Arabia. I'm not the guy, you know, when the king dies, who goes there, shakes hands and says nice things to these guys. These guys are threatening my life. This way of interpreting or perverting Islam, I should say, is a threat to the way that I learned from my mother, the majority Islam.
I'm going to ask you what you stand for, because we look at your state premier of Baden-Württemberg, Winfried Kretschmann, and he says in politics you've got to be elastic. When it comes to our principles, we Greens have to be elastic and flexible, which is code for saying you don't actually have any principles at all.
He says the opposite. You have values, you have a clear orientation.
He said doing without, abstinence, used to be a Green credo. It never worked.
Well,
the Greens who spread that kind of idea clocked up more kilometres in their cars.
That's a very one-sided interpretation of his quote. Since he's a good friend of mine.
This is what he said.
Since he's a good friend of mine.
Can I finish the quote? The Greens who spread that kind of idea clocked up more kilometres in their cars and travelling by plane than the average Conservative singing in my choir. So he's saying you're a bunch of hypocrites, basically, isn't he?
No, what he says is, you know, you need to have a clear view, a clear vision where you want to go. But compromise is part of politics. You know, it's not something bad.
Sell
it's
your
part
principles.
Of politics.
Say anything to get into power.
Well, we were now in 9 of the 16 lenders in power, and since today, with Saxony-Anhalt, the 10th state is in power.
He says
and wherever we are in power, it's very clear we're only there if it's a clear policy against climate change for an inclusive society.
He says it's nonsense to have a two-party chairs, a man and a woman, one a left-winger, another a moderate. He says you have to choose, go one way or the other. So he's shooting your sacred cows one by one, isn't he?
Well, again, we have 16 Länder in Germany.
And he's the most popular politician, apparently, according to Eurobarometer in Germany.
Absolutely. I mean, you're talking about my home state, by the way. Baden-Württemberg is my home state. I have my constituency there, so don't tell me my home state.
Cem Özdemir, how damaging has the paedophile scandal in the party been, which you finally tried to lay to rest last year, going back to the 80s? Nobody called more loudly for an investigation into paedophilia in the Catholic Church than you did, but you seem reluctant to provide details of what actually happened.
Well, that's not true. That's certainly not true. I mean, we were the party who was toughest with its own history. We were the ones who asked for an independent inquiry, and we got the guy who is most distant to the Green Party, and he made a completely independent report. And the kind of things
you can't seriously expect people to believe you were tough when Volker Beck, who was one of your party, called in 2013 for sex with children to be decriminalised, caused a huge furore, and you made him spokesman for internal and religious affairs with views like that.
No.
And you're tough on those who think sex with children is allowable?
I'm not here to defend Volker Beck's quotes.
Well, why did you leave him in the party?
Well, first of all, he said that this quote was wrong. He said that when it was misunderstanding, he takes it back and takes responsibility for it. And I'm not there to judge people, but let's not forget this kind of debate was a really horrible debate, a bad debate, but my party was not the only place for that. The youth organization of the Liberals had the same.
But your co-chair, Simone Peter, had to apologise for this in 2014.
Well, she did that in the name of the whole party, but
yes,
I wish
the
I would have
party
wished
deeply regrets that it was responding to the debate.
I would have wished that
late.
everybody in the society would have taken the same responsibility that we did. I don't want to defend anything, but we were very clear and very outspoken with mistakes. Don't forget, when we started in the 80s, we were the ones who had this great idea of saving the environment, and a lot of strange groups tried to hijack that and tried to jump on it.
Yeah, but you've provided a home for people with pretty repellent views, haven't you?
But they were never the majority. They tried to hijack the party, and we threw them out.
You threw them out? Jürgen Trittin signed off one of your leading lights by mistake on a local party platform in 1981, saying
in 1981 and in 2013 it was used against him. Don't you think that's a bit unfair?
Well, he either has the views or he didn't.
I mean, obviously nobody said that he had the views. Even his hardest criticizers
didn't say he had the views. Isn't there something that you need to be absolutely transparent and clear?
But that's what we are if you follow the German news.
Will you pay compensation? You've never revealed how much compensation you paid.
Unfortunately, I have to say you're not well informed there. I mean, the German media
agrees. How much compensation did you pay?
It's on every individual case. We had, as far as I know, we had 2 cases.
3.
And in all
If
those
we're saying
cases,
the facts, let's stay with the facts.
In all
It's
those
3
cases, well, my co-chair is leading the commission who was looking into that, so I'm not familiar with every detail, but in every case where it was proven that there's some link, however it is, to the Green Party, we said that we want to pay compensation based on the individual situation. And again, it's not us, it's a commission.
And you never told us what the individual situations
wait,
were.
let me conclude. And it's not us who decides that, it's a commission where people independent are included from all different kinds of orientations. So again, you know, I'm the one who criticizes his own party very tough, but I think here, it took a while, I agree there, but we were very tough. We were very tough, very clear, and there is nothing that we hide. I would wish that every party is as transparent as we are here.
Cem Özdemir, thanks for being on Conflict Zone.
Welcome.